back to the Path to Recovery podcast. I'm here with my beautiful Lora Lee. She's going to be assisting me in this talk today.
Woo-hoo!
Say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, everybody. What we're going to talk about today is a kind of an interesting scenario that happened to us. We were together and driving into work, and a scenario happened, and it kind of brought up a lot of discussions between us both after. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Hitchhiker. It all started, we were driving out of our dirt road area, coming down a hill, and there was this guy looking a little frazzled, I'll call it. And he had a backpack and he had some other stuff, and we were kind of throwing it back and forth. Do you want to pick him up? Do you want to pick him up? What do you think? What do you think? Ultimately, I just stopped the car and we picked the guy up. So right out of the gate, there was a deep conversation that the guy was having, mostly with himself, but it kind of was like him trying to advertise his knowledge or his wisdom or whatever it was. Now, you did all the talking. I kind of sat back and just listened to the whole thing because I didn't think that anything I would say would have a lot of value to go into this man because I just didn't believe he was completely with it at the moment. What was kind of some of your thoughts going into it, especially start from the beginning when we were trying to decide whether to pick him up and take him anywhere?
Well, I think it's pretty interesting because I picked up several hitchhikers, and the truth is I used to be a hitchhiker, and so I was always thumbing it and, going from one part of the state to another in California.
Right.
So I'm perfectly aware of what that looks like. I also know what it looks like to be homeless, and this, guy was kind of disheveled, but that is never the deciding factor for me picking up a hitchhiker. And so we're actually traveling the same direction as him, and you and I look at one another, and it's kind of like that undisclosed acknowledging there's a human and what are we going to do?
Right.
And you asked me, so what do you think? Should we pick him up? And I think in that moment he actually turned in essence of please.
Yes.
Without saying the verbiage. And so immediately my response was, I usually always go, okay, God, how would you have me do this?
Right.
Is this going to be okay? I don't have my grandchildren, so this is something I can provide. Do I have room in the back seat where I don't have a ton of stuff? Do I have to really think about this? And my automatic response was I looked in the back seat to see where I could make room. And Bear was like, well, I guess we're doing this.
Yeah.
And so the guy got in right behind me, and there was an air about him that felt, at first you never know who you're bringing into your car. You don't know the kind of communication that you're going to have. And he started kind of throwing out there the fact that, he's got some herb that it was like 10 million words were coming out of his mouth as quickly as he could possibly spew them.
Yeah.
And I caught the one about, I've got some herb, and he was making it sound more like herb than pot, as if...
Or whatever else would be there. As if it wasn't the same thing.
Yeah, but as if he was trying to really watch his vocabulary on how he was speaking to sound profound. And to me, I felt in that moment I had to watch myself.
How come?
Because I wanted to make sure that what I projected was nice and kind.
Yeah.
So I wanted to tell him, what, dude, we don't use.
Yeah.
It ain't our thing. And he immediately went into, oh, that place that you live, it could be used for... ceremony, spiritual ceremony, peyote. I mean, that was... All of a sudden, he was acting as if he knew the place and stated quite matter-of-factly that he did know of it.
Yeah.
And growing up in his youth, that this was an area that he had grown up in.
Yeah. I think he said he was north of us. I think he gave us a specific location, but he's a local.
Yeah.
Call him enough of a local to know, or at least he had a semblance of the words to make me believe that he might have lived here. Maybe not in Sedona, but at least close enough to be aware of what Sedona has.
Absolutely. And his portrayal was as if he knew what he was talking about the place that we live. And we live in a retreat center that's not ours, but it is a beautiful, well put together spiritual center.
Absolutely.
And I love what they do for themselves and for other people. I dig what they do, and it makes it easier for me to live out there and not being a part of what they have going.
Right.
So I dig the vibe. And so what he was putting out there was all these things, ceremony and the Indians and an event that took place out there that was kind of painful. It was very painful, is what it was. And it was a big learning curve for everybody who was involved and those who were providing the space. But he was acting as if he knew all about this stuff, and I felt defensive in that moment.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how were your emotions going? Were you at any point throwing in judgments towards him? I mean, I ultimately, like I said at the beginning, I just kind of shut down and just went for the listener. I just wanted to hear the conversation, and I didn't want to interject. you're now saying that you got triggered into a defensive mode, almost like you wanted to protect the sanctity of the location that we're at now.
Absolutely. I really did. I felt that in that moment, it was a subtle attack, and I wanted to make sure very clearly that he knew the information that you have is not correct. And that place has been diligent on providing healers from tribes and nations and belief systems in order to cover the land and give it back love, because it was a tragic event that took place. And that event, anyways, is very triggering for me.
So let's explain. Let's dig into that. Why is it triggering for you? Why is the event triggering for you? And then why did his comments trigger you as well?
Well, because where we live at, the beauty of the spiritual center, a gentleman came out. He was involved with The Secret, and everybody was getting some great knowledge. Everything was very, profound. Belief systems. If you believe that you're going to be wealthy, you're going to be wealthy, and, stand your ground. It's kind of like Tony Robbins, but not.
Right. Trying to get on the metaphysical, spiritual side of Tony Robbins instead of the hardcore.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of what it was. And he took it to such an extreme that there was a tragic event and 3 people lost their lives at this retreat several years ago. And he went to prison for it and did all that. And, did the time that he was sentenced to. But in that event, I lived there and I know what they did. And I read the book before I knew these individuals. And I don't know them deeply, but before that I was able to have conversation with them, and I knew their truth behind it.
Right.
How they believed they saw it. So their belief system behind how...
And you're talking about the people that run the place.
The people that run the spiritual retreat center. Yeah. And I felt in defense of them because I know what they had been through. I know the tragedy that it caused because it was their land.
Right.
Although they were providing the space.
Right. They were providing a space for somebody that had the potential of providing good, healthy, loving concepts to people.
Great atmosphere. Yeah. Instead of a man came in with a very powerful ego and tried to put God in the mix. Yeah. And people being like, but you can't put ego and God in the same platform. It just doesn't work. You can't have one and the other. You get to pick.
You know the people that run the place, and you know that they've done diligent work and that they've put in their heart and soul to this place to make it a beautiful new retreat and to create a new environment for people that can feel safe again.
Yes.
And they've done a phenomenal job, by the way, of doing that. So your understanding of that situation and the people that run the place was very heartfelt, and you kind of walked through their walk with them somehow.
I did. I read Michael's book. My husband and I, at the time, after everything had taken place, several years later, we built a medicine wheel out there. It was very important, and it did represent the Thunderbird, which is our ego. But the medicine wheel, for me, is very important. It's a spiritual walk, and it was another aspect of creating healing for that space. So I feel like I have an investment, personal, spiritual investment into the area. Right. I live there, and this is a place that I absolutely love.
Right. And if you listen to any of our previous podcasts, you might get a little flavor as to the environment that both Lora Lee and I came from, bringing us together in this one place that's just gorgeous, beautiful, and the energy is phenomenal. So here we are picking up a hitchhiker, and he starts talking about
doing ceremonies and bringing in drugs and da-da-da. I mean, it was like so many things were coming out of his mouth. All I could catch the fact is that he's presenting that, oh, wouldn't that be cool if, you could do ceremonies and, peyote, and I felt offended. And I was like, no, that's a drug-free zone. Yeah. So immediately my defense came out to, no, that's a drug-free zone. There's no drugs, no alcohol, no smoking. You can't do that on the other side of that bridge.
Right.
And I felt my temperature rise, and I was like, oh, isn't that interesting? It's a place that does not belong to me. Mm-hmm. And yet I was feeling an attachment to that place.
I kind of see that when I hike and I see garbage on the trails and so. I get these probably a very similar, I don't own this, but it's beauty.
Yeah.
And it's peace and it's love. And why would you want to consider bringing that attitude? Of course, here we are. That's a judgment on our part.
I did.
Straight up judgment that we're saying somebody's going to come here to decimate or to lessen the beauty of it, which, of course, through our belief system, we know
it's nothing. We don't belong here anyway.
We don't belong here anyway. So
this is not our home.
So you immediately get into a nice defensive understanding or approach to this. So where do you think, if you were to have to pull this back another 10 steps, where do you think this is coming from? Because it's not just because of Angel Valley. We all know there's something deeper in all of our triggers.
Yes.
So something triggered you that said, you need to stand up. You need to be defensive because you're apparently being attacked. So what is it? Do you think you can go back further?
You know what? I'm not sure. although be it subtle in the description of it, it wasn't like I would have been triggered before. In my old life, I would have been triggered, and I'd have let him out of the car right then.
Right.
Because if I felt that I was being attacked, I don't need it. I had better boundaries even.
Better boundaries with a more messed up
I'd have put a
life.
line, I'd have put a line out, and I would have said, you know what, dude, I'm going to take you to the end of the road, and you got to catch another ride from there. I'd have been okay enough to take him to the end of the road.
Right.
But I felt that there was more to this, and so I'm having to go to God. Do I think that I could have handled it better? I believe if I would have kept my mouth shut.
Yeah.
But it's this young man wanted to keep talking.
Right.
And it felt awkward because Bear wouldn't say anything. And I'm going,
That's called a setup.
oh my goodness. I wasn't sure, honestly, and I'm going to put another one of my judgments out there because I did. I judged in the moment. And with the amount of verbiage that was coming out of his mouth, and at best, it was probably like an ayahuasca trip he was coming off of. And
guys,
this is a judgment.
Yeah. This is a judgment, but also there's a lot of wisdom behind Lora Lee's past that would allow her to be able to make a quick assessment. Not a judgment, a discernment. So this is where it becomes different.
I still felt it
depends.
was a judgment. I did. I gotta
was just going to
say.
say it depends on how you felt about it.
I did. Well,
So
I
if
had to
you
be
were-
careful because anytime we see something, and whether we say it's good or bad, there's a judgment.
Right.
It
Exactly.
doesn't have to be slightly
But here's the
or
deal. No.
intensely.
Here's the deal. The discernment is different from a judgment. Discernment is the way I approached it, and I was like, I'm pretty sure the guy's probably loaded, but I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
That's the truth. I'm coming from not your life. I'm coming from not his life. I'm coming from an alcoholic's life. I can always tell when somebody's drunk. I don't know what the guy was doing or what he might have done. I was just saying, okay, it appears as though he might be on something. And I was just letting it go. So that was a discernment. It wasn't the dude's on something. I don't think I need to have this, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I
not
never
that
felt
you
that.
did. Not that
yeah,
you
I
did,
never
but-
felt that. But I have to say, so my first thing was, okay, so it could be he did an ayahuasca ceremony, although he was alone. So the probability of that, highly unlikely. He said some other people came into the camp. So I'm trying to discern the mentality simply because I know what it looks like to have friends fry and not come back.
Yeah.
I know what it looks like to have people have bad trips and try to recover from them.
Yeah.
I know what that emotionally feels like, and this felt as if ayahuasca would have made him more loving because it's more of a Mother Earth kind of thing. LSD or mushrooms or whatever, mushrooms maybe even possible. I would say it was probably more of an LSD trip because of the aggression that I felt in my body.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you here too. As I was listening to everything, I heard him getting defensive. And getting more aggressive. Because the more you were trying to put in something a little calm and nice and lovey, he was getting a little more...
He was agitated.
Yeah, he was getting agitated. So...
The more God I would put in, the more he was like, well, and which God? Which God do you talk to? And he was like, Krishna? And I was like, it doesn't matter. There's only one God. If you want to call it Krishna, you want to call it Buddha, you want to call it Muhammad, you want to call it Jesus, there's only one God.
Right.
I'm talking more about the consciousness, and I felt the aggression, the aggressiveness, and I wondered, in that moment, this could go bad.
I was just going to say, where would you go with that thought next? And because of your past history and all of that, this could go bad means the guy could pull out a knife and stab you in the back of the head, right? That's kind of what your brain went. In my head, it was like, I never would conceive it, because I never experienced that in my life, of that scenario. So you getting that defensive mode, yet what was interesting is you kept on. You would keep communicating with him, even though you'd have these
I was trying
moments.
to slide as many of those hooks that he was trying to project out there to see how he could affect. I was trying to stick in just as many hooks as I could about God.
Yeah,
But people, you can't hear something that you're not ready for.
Right, and this guy, all he was doing, in my assessment of the conversation, all he was doing was trying to connect in a vague, meaningless way. He was trying to throw out a hook and say something that was quote-unquote profound, but really not, because where it's coming from was more garbled.
Yeah.
It didn't have a lot of fluidity or connectivity to the conversation he was trying to have.
The content.
Yeah, the content.
There was no depth in the content.
Yeah, there didn't seem to be depth. It was just, I'm going to say this so that the people I'm with right now think I'm a genius and think I'm all that in a box of chips. So I didn't see anything coming from him that had clarity, not meaning what he said, but where he was at. I believed that he was not in a clear place. Therefore, anything that was said to him was going to be going up against a blank wall. And yet you continued to converse with the guy. So what was it that makes you want to do that? Is it just who knows what seed I plant he might just get?
I was hoping. Because it doesn't matter. I understood that the content wasn't going to be grabbed. But at any moment that you can plant a seed, even on unfertile soil, maybe there's fertile soil. Who might have judged what's fertile and what's not?
Exactly.
And who is it for me to say this isn't just a moment that he's having a really rough time? So I have to make sure clearly. In the end of it, I had to envision myself kissing him on the forehead and seeing the light in him and letting him go.
Right.
And what took place is when we let him off further than I had intended.
Because I was driving the car, folks. That's why she didn't have a choice.
I probably would have dropped him off about a mile or two quicker.
Right.
If I would have been alone, I would have dropped him off at the end of the road.
Yeah.
And that's the truth, for my own protection, right? But
But
always.
again,
I've done stranger things.
Yes, you have.
I have. But in this same essence, the more I tried to bring in, for me, God is everything. It's got to be about God. So I'm trying to interject on all his worldly knowledge as much as he could display.
Right.
And as much as I could display. It's not like I'm any more worldly. I just, I'm streetwise. I know what that looks like.
Wisdom.
And if you have a mind that's on a chemical substance, there is absolutely a couple of things that can take place. And I believe the second one happened. The first one is when you're on a spiritual walk, or even when you're just on a high, right? You're taking LSD. You're going on a journey. And some people like to be the bus driver, and some people like to be the riders on the bus.
And I have no idea what she's talking about, but I'm running with it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the people who are driving the bus are giving you a tour.
Okay.
Right? So it's being a tour guide. And you can display and give information. And you hope that the tour guide is going to give you something that will take you and create a beautiful place. You want that to take place. What can happen with this spiritual tour guide, and I've been on many journeys and been a tour guide and tried to have been guided, but I'm a control freak, so that doesn't work well for me.
Right.
So if you're a good tour guide, everything will be lovingly and it will be impressive. Right? The feeling will be like, well, that was a good trip.
That's why people believe that drugs can get them connected to God when it's not true. It's just masking something anyway.
Yeah.
But
and on the other scale of it, though, what if you're not a good tour guide? And what can you take somebody into? What can you take somebody into who's already started the journey before you got on the bus? Okay, so he's already got his own little journey going, and then his profound feeling, right? Because if we're intoxicated, what do we know? We think we're spilling out a whole bunch of knowledge and looking really cool, and we just got a bunch of gibberish and we're drooling.
Yeah.
That's the truth. So he thinks he's got all this wealth of knowledge, believes that he does, and maybe he does.
Yeah.
But in this moment, it's convoluted because the drugs aren't clarity.
Right.
It's masked, it's convoluted. And then you have somebody come in on a different level and isn't on the same page. We got not only just two different chapters, but two different books. Right. And now we're trying to meld the books. Okay, so that spiritual journey that he was in and trying to be mellow all of a sudden is antagonized because I'm bringing in the word God. And you know what? When ego is on fire, what happens to somebody when you're bringing in God? They get pissed.
Right.
And that's what I feel was... he was trying to bring in God or Krishna or whatever he was...
To what his level could at the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the spiritual awareness, he was trying, and I kept feeling him slip a little bit. So I felt I was trying to be full of finesse, but I could also feel a little bit of agitation within my own being. So nothing...
So you were almost possibly kind of throwing daggers? Not deep ones, but like, no, you don't know what you're talking about, young man. This is... Was it kind of like that, but in subtle ways?
Yeah. I don't know if I would use the word daggers, but, it's kind of like going, my friend, I understand. Yeah. But check this out. Right. And check this out. It doesn't mean it came across that way. It could have came across to him as daggers, because the truth is, when this young man stepped out of the car, he threw his stuff... out of the car, he threw it down and was like done. He was antagonized. Yeah. So unfortunately, what I believe took place is the spiritual walk that he felt like he was having might have had a breakdown. Yeah. Right? Because if it was ayahuasca, it would have been loving, and it would have been in a more controlled, I hope, environment. Right. Right? And not that I'm promoting taking drugs, because I don't. Not at all. No, not on any level. I fried my brain before I was 16 years old. I took enough of that stuff. So I understand the context of it and the depth, and I honestly believe there was a part of me that remembered my past and remembered the feelings of frying. And what happens to your body while you're frying is it feels like it's mildly being electrocuted. and on the edge of whatever comes next.
Okay.
Right? So
without knowing what comes next.
Well, that's kind of like my life. What part of it did I plan for? Well, none of it. I just planned for it all to be like, wow.
Yeah.
Very eventful. I knew my life was going to be very eventful, so therefore a lot of events took place.
Uh-huh.
And I did a lot of LSD, a lot of mushrooms as a young kid, even through my teens, and I had experienced a really bad trip on mushrooms.
Yeah.
And to me, it felt like Armageddon. My body was on fire. Everything was on fire. I literally saw fire everywhere, bodies burning. So it was a bad trip. I wonder...
You wonder if he was experiencing
if
a
maybe when ego gets mad, when ego gets offended...
Or attacked by God or love or beauty.
Right? What happens to it? It feels...
Rears its head and it starts wanting to chomp better.
And it becomes painful.
Yeah.
So what me trying to do good could have created antagonistic harm. I had to go and forgive myself for it because in that moment I was feeling judgmental.
I was just going to say.
Although, even in the judgment, and of which I had to say, I'm going to have to say, yes, I judged. And discernment, absolutely, because I know the signs. I know the symptoms. There's not too much that people can mask from me. I can smell drugs on a body.
Right.
Seriously. I can smell drugs on a body. I can tell when you've been using them, not just by looking at your eyes, because I can see your skin. I can smell it.
And body behaviors and all other, there's other signs that allows...
There's a multitude of signs.
Yeah.
I would have been a great cop.
So, yeah, there's a story in that too, but we won't go there. So as we let him off and then we drive away, I knew...
I've thought about it ever since.
As I'm jumping my thoughts here, I knew that you had a lot to work on. I knew that I didn't have a lot to work on because I didn't invest in it. I didn't actually invest in that moment with him. I could have actually, if you wouldn't have been in the car and he was sitting in your seat, in the passenger seat, and he would have started conversations, I could have been quiet during the entire ride. And he would have probably caught on some way. He might have been thinking, oh, this guy doesn't like me. I might as well just ask to get dropped out now. It would have transpired however he needed it to. So as we dropped him off, God bless you, have a good day, and we take off. Knowing you, I knew that you were going to be working on this.
I did. I absolutely knew I was going to be working on it because of the way I felt. It's not unfamiliar with my body actually feeling the effects of the drugs.
Right.
The remembrance.
Yes.
The body starting to raise temperature, that whole feeling of anxiety for what's coming next.
Yeah.
I felt that I was feeling his feelings.
Right.
So I felt as if I had connected maybe a little bit too much. Right?
Which is absolutely. And there was nothing I was going to be able to do. A lot of thoughts were running through my head. It's like, what do I tap her on the leg and, shh, be quiet, don't talk to him anymore? But I needed you to go through it because you needed to go through it, apparently. So I needed to be quiet because that had to be your walk. If it was my walk, I would have probably put in something.
Yeah.
But I think that had to be your walk.
I think it was beautiful on how it went because I stood my ground when it comes to God. It wasn't like I wasn't trying to fancy it or fluff it.
You weren't bringing out a Bible and saying, "Liz, Jesus Christ, your Lord and Savior."
Yeah.
Amen.
I don't want to Bible thump anybody, and I can't force your beliefs on them, but trying to throw in the sides. You never know where the ground is fertile.
Right.
I'm not one to know where the ground is fertile.
Right.
But who am I to judge
Absolutely.
where it isn't, right?
Absolutely.
So it's my job to make sure that people know that they are loved.
So since then, what are you getting from it? Is it just that, what you just said? Just the fact that you got to make an effort and try to let people know that they're loved? Or was there something more to that?
I think there's a couple of things that take place because I think judgment even took place later on. I know that it didn't leave my mind for a while. You know my truth. I have been homeless. I have been, I used drugs until I was 34 years old. I started using drugs when I was 9. I never took a break in between, and I'm
Thank
familiar.
God you're alive.
I got into strangers' cars. I got into cars that I couldn't get out of and had to hop out windows and, defense. There's a lot of stuff that I think I brought with me and was trying to weed out as I was going. This is going to be okay. Don't be attached to this. Remember that. Yep, you're good. You can let it go. Right. All those painful things and scenarios I put myself into.
Right.
The judgment I took from it was I was concerned for his well-being.
Yeah.
So much so that in that same day there was a man that was that lost his life. I had a customer come in and tell me that there was a man running with a machete and just down the street. And my first thought was, the guy I let out of the road, did I antagonize him too far? Was I not gentle enough? So I started second guessing my own
approach.
Absolutely. I put myself, I'm like, okay, I'm putting myself in the crosshair. Is it a burden to bear? And I had to let that go. Can I let go of attachments and people that I have no control over? There's not a soul on this planet that I have any control over.
That's correct, yeah.
My job is to be the best human I can be, give love, make sure to show respect, show people that they matter, right? For my whole life, it's people need to know they matter because they don't.
Yes.
We don't know as humans that we matter.
Right.
And so when they told me about this gentleman that was running down the street, not too long after that, we had found out that he had lost his life because he was very violent. And I didn't know if it was the same man. So, and even if it wasn't the same man, you have to give love.
Right.
It's important. I feel so grieved for the man who chose violence, and for
the person that
our
had
protectors,
to protect
our
others.
local police that had to protect themselves and others and had to make the call. And how do you make the call? But I felt there's a judgment in there because I wondered if it was the man that I let out of the car.
And were you going to have guilt? Did you have guilt?
I think I was going to bring in, because there was nothing, I think absolutely. There was nothing that I could do in that moment that was going to change a man whose thought process was in a trip. He was in a trip. And I have no control. Right. So what did it make me do? It made me dream more. This is the strange part about me. It made me dream more about being, I really want to obtain the consciousness, and I'm human. I'm human. So how do I put that forth? I'm wanting to, win the lottery and create a center so I can bring in the homeless off the street, so we can provide a soup kitchen for people to help them. Our military veterans, these guys, I can't say we've actually turned our back on them, but we don't have enough resources, I believe, in order to help them. So more and more becoming mentally ill, and they're choosing drugs as an escape because they're in pain. So we have a society that is full of pain, whether you've been in the military, active, not active, human,
just in life.
In life, okay? So I haven't been in the military, but I have PTSD, right? I live with healing the patterns of my old self because I was traumatized, right? So now I'm trying my best to be all those things that I wanted to recover from. All right? Be happy, be healthy, be peaceful, be loving, be all those things to everybody and everything. So that's what I want. I want to be able to be of assistance, be of service. And that's what these podcasts are about.
Exactly.
In that moment, I noticed that in our valley, we've got over 400 and some odd people who are homeless. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
Right? Some people choose to be homeless, and I get it. I totally dig it. You don't want to be a part of the system. I understand why, right?
Yeah.
But those people who are just a paycheck away from being homeless, and those who miss the paycheck and they are homeless.
Situational homelessness versus intentional.
How do we fix it? He represented to me all that I want to heal. So what did he represent to me? All of that I am healing.
Yeah.
He represented the old me. Maybe not, completely. I have to see me in everybody. So mental illness is a serious issue. I don't believe I'm mentally ill, and because I don't believe it, I probably am. Who knows? And mental illness doesn't qualify or quantify a drug addiction. It doesn't. It escalates the issue.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was quite a learning curve for me in that moment. And also to note, if I'm going to put myself in a position to pick up a hitchhiker, I need to evaluate and assess the situation more discerning and understand people are still using drugs. And that's just the truth. I can't save everybody, and I can't be attached to the outcome. I shouldn't be attached to the outcome, but it's still a part of me. I think what was beautiful is when God showed me, make sure you kiss his forehead and show him love.
Right.
So I had to acknowledge that this human is me. Me, my brother,
everybody that you've experienced going through the same one.
Yeah. All those others that have had experiences, they're still me in a different form. And that could be
just a metaphoric for people that have never walked that walk of a drug addiction, or maybe you have a different addiction, but it isn't related to mind-altering stuff. It doesn't matter, because this same concept applies to anything that we're experiencing. We end up seeing ourselves in the things around us, and that's how we end up learning the lessons, is to be able to walk away from something. First off, know that our boundary is, I don't know if I'm safe, so I won't pick this person up. I don't know them, and I don't know what they're about, so maybe I won't pick this person up. We know enough locals that are homeless locals, that are transients, that we pick them up. Yeah. When we have an opportunity, if there's room, we pick them up, bring them to wherever they need to. But we also have to have that balance and understanding that we're not judging, but we're being safe. We're taking care of our human. Mm-hmm. If we don't have our human, we can't do these podcasts. We can't help others if we're not here to help them in the human.
Yeah, we're here to pass the message, and the facts are, we have people out there that are emotionally, spiritually, physically, mentally wounded. They need help. So if we get a moment and we see somebody who needs assistance, and we feel safe in that moment, we're going to assist.
Yep.
That's just how life works for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was great to have him show me a little bit deeper, even though he didn't know it.
Right, exactly. So maybe that was the Christ, the consciousness coming to you through him.
I believe so.
Yeah. Wonderful. Excellent,
you guys
folks.
are awesome, guys. Thank you for listening to me.
Thanks again, folks. Listen to the next podcast when it comes up. We'll have this one out real soon. Thank you very much. God bless you all, and we will hear from you again next time.